significant do you think is the 700 trillion won investment pledge by Korea's top conglomerates in shaping the country's competitive edge in AI, semiconductors, and clean energy amid the global economic realignments?
I'm delighted to join you today from London. I think it's quite significant. It's not shocking, but I think it's quite significant. It means clearly that in that new era, and we are entering very slowly and very painfully in a new era, which you could say started 8, 9 months ago, when President Trump entered the White House for the second time. And the second Trump presidency is very different from the first one 8 years ago. Why? Very briefly, because in his first time in the office of the US president 8 years ago, Trump's wing were clipped. Many members of his own party, the Republican Party, were believers in free trade, neoliberal capitalism, open borders, blah, blah, blah. And what happened in the past 8 years, Trump got rid of them. So now he controls most of his own party and is able to deploy his policy of industrial nationalism. These are two key words, industry nationalism. And in that new era, there are only two big players, two gigantic players, the American eagle and the Chinese dragon. And most countries are losers. So sadly, so in the age of geoeconomics, that accelerating, very brutal economic, industrial, financial competition between Washington and Beijing means that they are partitioning the world, right? So America is winning, but China is also winning, and they are intensifying their rivalry, and most of the rest of the world will be in the camp or the category of losers, except a small category of countries who will be winners. And clearly, in my opinion, the biggest winners are countries like Singapore, South Korea, and Switzerland. Switzerland, initially, Trump was very harsh with them. Last week, he made a surprise, quote unquote, deal. And now they are in the category of the countries who will win a lot from the age of geoeconomics. South Korea is an amazing example because South Korea has some things that both the Chinese and the Americans want. So first, the geographic position is amazing, but it's not only that. Okay. They are very strong in advanced microchips.
Yes.
Shipyards, so building modern ships, both military ships and civilian ships. The South Koreans are excellent. So that's a second thing.
Yes.
And the third thing is AI. So I think that makes them a strategic partner. And if I may add one thing quickly, they announced multiple times to please, quote unquote, President Trump and to get a deal from the Americans that the Korean companies would invest trillions of dollars every year in new factories in America, in Baltimore, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, etc. So what they did today is saying to their own public opinion, listen, guys, we're not only building huge microchip factories and shipyards in America, we're also investing at home domestically.
Okay, Mr. Firzli, within the context of America and China now increasingly partitioning technology ecosystems and markets, what are the strategic advantages or risks maybe does Korea face in aligning its industrial investments, do you think?
So South Korea is in a beautiful sweet spot.
Okay.
It's like a beautiful girl, and there are many princes or kings who want to marry her, right? So the situation is quite nice, right? It's the ideal pivot nation, just like Singapore, just like Switzerland, and to a lesser extent, there are other pivot nations which are also in a sweet spot, countries like Australia, Russia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Israel, but they are in what I would call the second pivot nation category. South Korea is in the top category, really. And so it doesn't face a lot of risks. It's maneuvering. And why is it in a sweet spot? Because it maneuvered smartly. So as soon as Trump entered the White House in February, if you remember, many Europeans did not take him seriously. So between February and April, there was a 3 month period where many Europeans were mocking, and even the British, they were making fun of Trump and saying he's an imbecile, etc. And that lasted 3 months. And in April, very brutally, he started what he called the trade liberation war. And once again, the Europeans and the Brits did not understand him. They said in April that he was a loser. If you remember, the dollar collapsed for 2-3 weeks, And if you remember, the NASDAQ and Wall Street, they completely collapsed in the first 2 weeks of April. So everyone said, ha ha, Trump is an imbecile. At the same time, the South Koreans and the Singaporeans, very smart, they were going to Washington and they were already negotiating with Trump. Why? Because they understood it's not about trade. It has little to do with trade. It's about industry. It's about long-term investment in gigantic new factories. This is the new game.
Yeah. And what do you think, like, what could be the ripple effects might Korea's investment surge have on the declining industrial investment trends observed maybe in the EU and the UK particularly regarding the global supply chains and the innovation hubs?
So here, it's really cruel. I mean, I'm smiling because it's, as we say in ancient Greek and French, sometimes when you're desperate, it's better to smile and laugh than to cry. So okay. I feel sad for Europe and Britain because they are really in the categories of losers, right? And why? Very briefly, because they are unfocused. So what is the recipe for success in countries like Singapore, South Korea, or Trump's America? It's aggressive focus. So don't disperse your resources and your time in 20 or 30 different issues. Focus aggressively on 1 or 2 or 3 issues, which will really matter a lot in the future. That is the recipe for success in America and South Korea. And the Europeans, what are they doing? So if you look at the schedule, the daily schedule of meetings by Emmanuel Macron or Keir Starmer or Ursula von der Leyen, they spend half their time focusing on Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is a completely irrelevant issue for the future of European industry, European finance, European competitiveness. It's irrelevant. And when the prime ministers of Western Europe and the European Union devote 50, 60, 70% of their time and energy on irrelevant, non-important, secondary or tertiary issues, what does it tell you? They're not focusing on what really matters.
And do you think maybe Korea's focus on the cutting-edge sectors like the AI and maybe clean energy position it maybe as a vital player in the evolving global economic order divided between the US and China? And how might this influence the regional and global alliances?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The answer is in your question. Why is Trump focused? Because he understands that the clock is ticking, right? China is becoming more and more powerful, more and more advanced. So very simply, if we slice the world economy in just, broad brush, in just 9 or 10 sectors, and if we assume that the world economy is about 9 or 10 big sectors, China is already ahead of America in 6 or 7 sectors, including shipyards. And South Korea has excellent shipyards, right? Shipbuilding.
Yes.
The 2 best in the world now are the Chinese and South Koreans. The Chinese are ahead of America in 6 or 7 sectors, including civil engineering, construction, renewable energy, and shipyards. America is only ahead now in 2 or 3 sectors. What are they? Aviation, civilian and military aviation, microchips, and South Korea is very strong in microchips. And the third one is AI, right? Yeah. So the Americans now are they're redoubling their efforts. They want to catch up in the 6 or 7 other sectors where they are now behind China. One of them is shipyards. The other one is modern civil engineering and construction. The other one is energy and high-speed rail, modern transportation infrastructure. In all these fields, the South Koreans can bring them amazing advantages.
And let's talk about how might this large-scale domestic investment impact Korea's labor market, the export profile, and the broader economic growth, especially given the heightened geopolitical tensions and the shifting trade patterns worldwide.
Yeah, here it's a delicate balance, right? Because Trump, to speak vulgarly and aggressively and bluntly, the Trump way, Trump is squeezing even his friends, right? So even his friends and allies, like South Korea and Saudi Arabia, he's squeezing them for money. Although the Swiss, he was very aggressive and he squeezed out the Swiss for every penny they could commit to invest in America in the next 4 years, right? So when you do that, the danger is if you say, okay, we will tell the big industrial companies and the big financial companies from South Korea, Saudi Arabia, blah, 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 Switzerland, to invest massively in America in the next 5 years. The question is, how much money is left at home? So how much money is left to invest in factories in Saudi Arabia, in Switzerland, in South Korea, to create jobs locally to all citizens? And here again, for now, the Swiss, the Singaporeans, the Saudis, the South Koreans have maneuvered quite smartly because Trump has kind of allowed them to keep some of their money to invest domestically at home and usefully. Why am I saying usefully? Because Trump has reduced the import duties, right? So when they produce stuff at home in South Korea, they will be able to export part of it to America because the tariffs are not aggressive for countries like South Korea or Singapore.
Well, from London, that was the director of the EU ASEAN Centre and former World Bank advisor, Mr. Maher Nicolas Firzli. Thank you so much for your insights, sir.